I am so excited to be here today with these incredible women, and we are going to be talking about how to normalize the conversation and raise awareness around important health issues. And that these ladies do this through the work that they do on television and film, and also personally. And they're going to be sharing their thoughts personally about health issues, and a lot of health issues that we don't normally talk about. And just to lead off this very important discussion, I wanted to provide you with a few facts which I think really reinforce how important it is for us to talk about women's health and health care. Fact number one, women in the U.S. have the highest maternal mortality rate and highest C-section rate of all industrialized countries, and that mortality rate is 3 times the rate in the other industrialized country. Fact two, more than 1/3 of women in the U.S. report skipping needed medical care because of costs, and that is also a far higher rate than other industrialized countries. And fact three, U.S. women report the highest rate of emotional distress compared to other countries. And we're talking 34% versus 7% in Germany and 11% in France. So it's quite a difference. Now, one of the things that really doesn't get a lot of attention, and which Lauren Ash has really shone a light on, is the issue of PCOS. You see? It's so not known. I've looked into it and read about it, and I'm even giving you the wrong initials for it. And that stands for polycystic ovary syndrome. And actually, more than 1 in 10 American women suffer from this. And yet there is so little known about it, like medically known about it. And so, Lauren, tell us about your experience, because you had the hardest time even finding out what was going on with you. You had a lot of symptoms.
Yeah, the interesting thing about PCOS is that it manifests differently in almost every woman who has it. There's no kind of blueprint that you can say, okay, you have to have these 5 symptoms, and that means you qualify for a PCOS diagnosis. So because of that, it's very difficult to diagnose. I personally gained 30 pounds in 6 months. I was working out like a fiend. I was eating a meal plan, delivery plan every day, and I was still putting on weight, which at that point kind of defied science and was also wildly depressing. So I went to talk to a doctor, and he told me that I was over 30, so my metabolism was just slowing down, which was A, false, and B, again, wildly discouraging in terms of, obviously being someone who works on television and stuff like that. You're gaining 30 pounds in 6 months. That can potentially have an impact on your livelihood. So it wasn't until I actually had a dermatologist randomly suggest to me, have you been tested for PCOS? I said, I don't know what that is, that I was tested, and that was when I got the diagnosis, which was hugely validating, that it wasn't my fault that I was putting on weight, that I literally had a, hormonal issue of the endocrine system that was causing that to happen for me. But then it also was the beginning of a whole new journey, because there's so little research that's been done about PCOS. It's very hard to treat in one kind of normal manner, again, because every woman is different.
Right, and what exactly is it? It causes cysts on your ovaries, correct?
Correct. So, so your ovaries, my ovaries, when I first got my first internal ultrasound, which is as great as it sounds. If you haven't had one, sign up. Your ovary kind of looks like it's got a pearl necklace around it. There's a bunch of, basically your ovary is creating a follicle for the follicle to get your egg out of there, to get down so you can have your beautiful monthly cycle happen. But with someone with PCOS, the egg doesn't connect to the follicle. So you have all these kind of leftover follicles that sit there and essentially rot around your ovary, which can cause a myriad of issues. For example, I think I had 3 periods in a year once. And again, nobody knew why. This is why. But it's a disorder of the endocrine system. It affects your hormones more than anything. So a lot of women have higher testosterone levels, which means you can have facial hair and really bad acne all over your body, lots of fun symptoms. So a lot of it is about trying to regulate your hormone levels, get your estrogen up to where it needs to be, get your testosterone down to where it needs to be, and also regulate your blood sugar, because the number one side effect of PCOS is diabetes. Your body isn't processing sugar in the right way. So I was pre-diabetic when I was finally diagnosed, and I was somebody, again, who at that time was being taking such care of my health and what I ate and whatnot. So it is really important. A lot of people associate weight gain and that kind of thing with lifestyle habits, and you're just not trying hard enough, and that is absolutely a fallacy. It is completely false. And it causes so much distress for a lot of women, and I think it's really important that we talk about this issue, because a lot of people don't know that they have it. So hopefully talking about it is going to make people realize maybe this is something I should get tested for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, it can affect your fertility. And there's another health issue that can also affect your fertility and rarely gets talked about. I don't even know if I've heard it talked about before, but I'm going to bring this up. And this is something that Kelly has experienced and wants to tell you about. And that is fibroids. What was that?
Yeah, it's the Fibroid song.
Fibroids, in case you didn't hear.
Nobody knows about it. Right. So, the very short version of the story is that when I first got my period, it was always very painful and heavy and perfect attendance record ruined. I was knocked out. I stayed home from school, a couple of days a month once that started happening. And then in my 20s, it sort of normalized, and my periods were not as big of an inconvenience anymore. And then at a certain point, they got bad again. And, I did my own little Googling about it and thought, your hormones change and this and that. But the fundamental belief that I had absorbed was that periods are painful and uncomfortable, and that's normal. So I was willing to endure, frankly, a lot of discomfort. It wasn't until my husband was like, you yell out in pain. You yelp out in pain. You're doubled over. You shouldn't be in that kind of pain. That I was like, okay, maybe all of the doctors who had suggested that, surgery wasn't really urgent and, it could be done at any time. And surgery, you shouldn't do surgery because surgery is surgery and it's a big deal. You should only do it if it's absolutely necessary. And instead, go on this IUD because the hormones will sort of do work against your fibroids and you'll stop experiencing symptoms. None of that was working out for me. And I finally got to a doctor who literally lifted her fists and said, painful periods are not normal. I wish I could scream it from the rooftops. And it was at that point where I was like, I had to have the surgery at that point. And so I started talking about it with people around me, and I found out that everybody has freaking fibroids. I mean, not everybody, but it's just so prevalent. It's so common. Women are experiencing all kinds of painful symptoms, uncomfortable symptoms, acne-related symptoms, fertility-related symptoms, and this same doctor informed me that almost no research had been done on the cause and the prevention, most of all, of fibroids. And so here we are, particularly Black women, in which it occurs 3 times more than anybody else in this country. We're all suffering from it. And we're all just meant to sort of accept that that's okay. And it's not. I'll be the one to tell you that, if that is the case, then it should be treated as seriously as anything. If you're walking around and your wrist hurts, your doctor wouldn't just be like, yeah, sometimes your wrist hurts. It's just, you don't have to deal with that. So address it, take it seriously, and make your doctor take it seriously with you.
Yes, and that is, go ahead. Fibroids are so common, and they're also very common in women over 30, and they are growths in your uterus. And sometimes if you're trying to get pregnant, you absolutely have to get them removed. in order to have an egg fertilized. So, yeah, very important issue. And now we want to talk about another very important issue, and that is body positivity. And Jade, you've got a new TV series which is coming out in March, right?
Yes, I do.
And it's called Little Fires Everywhere.
Oh, thank you.
Got some fans looking forward to your show. And the show really deals with the opposite of body positivity, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Body pressures and issues. And you really, were affected by that.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I consider myself very lucky to have worked with Liz Tigelaar, who's our showrunner, Reese Witherspoon, Kerry Washington. These women that are so fierce, and they want to actually tell the story of what women go through, And with my character specifically, I mean, she grew up in 1997, and all of her value as a human being was based off of the way she looked and what she saw in magazines, And so there's a lot of pressure that goes on with that, There's no value on how she treats other people or how she thinks or what she feels, There's no value in that. It's just this, emphasis on perfection that just doesn't exist, So she gets into the habit of skipping meals and drinking Slim Fast, which is like the 90s equivalent to like the flat tummy teas that you see today and everything. And it's really interesting how that parallels the reality of today. It's still something that women go through, and it's such a
Totally.
lie. It's a lie that anyone's physical appearance adds value to them as a human being. You know what I mean? There's so much power in women being women, and knowing what they're capable of. And that's so much more than just any kind of physical attribute,
And in the show, isn't it, don't you feel a lot of pressure from your own mother?
In the show, yes. Luckily, I have an amazing mom in real life, so I don't have. But yeah. I mean, my mother's played by Reese Witherspoon, and she deals with the same things that she, my character just learned and was ingrained from a very young age, just simply by observing something that her mother goes through, that she learned from her mother. And it really just talks about what women have gone through throughout history. It's this emphasis that women are property, and that's what they've seen, and like that's all that they are, and so there's such a fixation on that, and it's just kind of trained into you at such a young age. And our show really represents that, and the truth of it, as uncomfortable as it is and as ugly as it feels, it's something that we do need to normalize and talk about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And now, Rachel, you also in real life have experienced kind of I guess it's part of the same thing. It's like women trying to take control over themselves and doing it in a not very positive way. And you had an eating disorder.
I did. And I just want to start off by saying I've actually never publicly spoken about this besides like friends and family. So I just really appreciate being given a space like this that's so safe to have all of us come and talk about tougher topics. Thank you. But this was very important to me still, and it was then. And I suffered from bulimia when I was in high school for years. And it was so tough because I felt like I was never the type of girl that would end up having that disease. And it came at a time when I felt like I had no control over anything in my life. And I felt like this was the one aspect I could control. And then, of course, it is the most controlling disorder. And my life changed because of it, not in a good way. And I think looking back, I grew up in LA, and I have such a loving, supportive family, but I think just naturally wanting to be in the entertainment industry, I set out, I was like, I want to be in film and TV, and I got a lot of responses at a young age, like, once you lose weight, once your skin clears up, once you get your braces off. And now looking back, I'm like, that built such a mentality of, I need to fix and alter things about myself. I can't come as I am. And I think that's lived with me ever since. And thankfully, I have overcome my disorder, and it's been years now. But I think just because I'm not suffering the direct, symptoms, I still think it's a battle every single day. Every single day, I carry it with me. And I think destigmatizing it and opening this up as a conversation and normalizing it is helpful to me. I hope it's helpful to anyone else in this room, and it's what I want to continue to do. But yeah, and I think mainly just focusing on my new mentality of it is okay to come as I am, exactly how I am right now, whatever that means.
Thank you so much for choosing this place to share your experience.
Gosh, I seriously can't imagine a better place. So thank you.
Yeah. Now, Ryan, you also felt so much pressure to be normal, or to be like the woman that you see in magazines, or that you see maybe in other television than you've been on. After you had your first child, you found that that you couldn't just follow what you read in magazines and the baby weight would drop off, and that it was really difficult, that we can't all be kind of like have rock hard abs within 2 months of having a baby.
Yeah, and I tried. I really did try. And, again, it's like, at the time, because we don't have conversations like this. It's just really striking to me that, like, we as women, I think there was a time when we could all just sort of sit around and just kind of like really share and swap and understand, But the magazines, I think, have replaced that. And I think, we read these magazines because we want that information. And whether it's Us or whether it's, Elle or Vogue, whatever it is, I think the reason why we're so voracious for those things is because that's how we find that community. That's how anyone is ever talking about any issue that relates to women. And, like, I can imagine walking past a magazine, oh, she's talking about PCOS. I'm going to grab this magazine because that's the only way anyone's talking about this thing. And finally you were like, oh, wait a minute. Let me start asking people. And as I'm sitting here, I'm like, best friend with PCOS, a best friend, we have a friend, best friend with, fibroids. So for me, I'm realizing that the reason why I did voraciously read these magazines is because I didn't have any other women to talk about, like, what happens when you have a baby. And unfortunately, I listened to Beyonce. Now, she's the queen.
Of course.
Of course. So one should listen to Beyonce for everything. However, there's a lot of gaps in what she was talking about. And
She is a personal chef.
she's a personal chef. She's a personal trainer. I never, two things, and I'll just share. With my second baby, I was beating myself up and like, I'm gonna do it this time. I'm gonna get in it. And literally, I'm counting the days. They say 6 weeks. They say, like, literally 6 weeks. The minute clicked over, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do it. And the next thing I know, someone's knocking on the door and walking in, and I had fallen asleep trying to do a plank. I was literally like, and the baby was in the swing sleep. I was like, and I remember being like, is gonna and it was like, what? Why did I even think that? And I will say, after I had my first baby, my a person I was working with at the time, I won't say if it was an agent or a manager, I was still about 6 months postpartum, and she said to me, she sat me down and said, I question your work ethic. I thought you wanted this career. I thought you wanted this. And, I mean, look at you. And I really question your work ethic. And
this was a woman who said it to you.
This was a woman with 2 children. And I just really remember thinking that I'm lazy. I obviously look like the horrible. I don't have a work ethic. It's a damn shame. I thought I did. I was like, I got it in Stanford. I thought I had to work, and not that proves anything, but it's just my life at that point. I thought that my identity was hard worker. And in that moment, it was taken away, and it was taken away because of what we all thought was like, you have that baby and you better snap back. You got 2 months. And if you don't do it in 2 months, then you didn't do it right. And it took me a really long time to realize the community that people had around them to make that possible that we never talk about. Yeah. Right. We never talk about what women have. I didn't even know a night nurse existed. I didn't know that was a thing. No one told me that. And I'm like, so wait a minute. I'm comparing myself to a woman who has the financial ability, which God bless her. Please, no one in this room think that this is me saying anything wrong with night. Get it, girl, if you can.
We're not going to get the
that nice-
beehive after you.
Yes, get that night nurse. But I'm saying it costs money, and it's not fair to compare my journey to a woman who has the ability to have someone come at 6:00 p.m. and then the baby and they sleep for 12 hours, and that woman leaves at 6 a.m. Of course you have a little bit more energy. You're not going to fall asleep doing plank when you fell. You had 12 hours of sleep. And God bless. Jobless. But my behind, at 6 o'clock, I took a little nap, and then me and the baby wake up, and then 3 o'clock, and then it's this all day when you have a newborn, And that, that impacts obviously your energy, your ability to, and it's not fair to compare this woman's journey to it's not fair to compare any woman's journey, but it occurred to me that was my only model, was what was in the magazines.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I want to bring up one other thing since we're on the subject of childbirth. I thought it was really great that Superstore, you guys did an episode about a woman who had to come back to work, 2 weeks after giving birth?
Less than that, actually, yeah. And what was interesting was when we read it at first, America Ferrera's character was coming back, I think, a few days after giving birth. And we all kind of said, is this realistic? Is this?
Yes, it is.
And we went for it. And so many women reached out on social media and were like, this is what happens to me. And I'd really applaud, our writers that they went there. I mean, she has lines in there about I'm wearing a diaper full of ice right now as I'm helping stock shelves, which a lot of women, again, reached out and said, that is my personal experience. I don't work at a job that allows us to have maternity leave, and this is what I have to do to live. So I thought that was a really cool, really interesting storyline to kind of tackle. We also got to see, the differences in, two women going through the same thing at the same time, childbirth at the same time, and one has great insurance and one doesn't. What does that look like?
Yes.
So it was a really I thought it was a really important, cool thing to kind of touch on. That resonated.
Well, again, we are the only industrialized nation that does not have guaranteed paid maternity leave for women. One final thing I just want to bring up is natural hair. And that is something that TV is finally tackling. Right, Kelly?
Yeah.
Finally.
Give a round of applause for natural hair. Yeah, it is such a different time.
Tell it, Kelly.
To see so many women. What I love particularly about this moment is because it actually feels as though we've gone beyond embracing natural textures and gone to seeing black hair art on TV. That was never a thing that we were meant to embrace. I remember, I wasn't planning on saying this. It's not really something I'm necessarily proud to admit, but I do think that it was caused by some brainwashing, frankly. But I remember seeing these super creative hairstyles in my neighborhood, and with color added and braids piled up on top of the head, and thinking you're doing the absolute most. That's tacky, And now I look at it and I'm like, our hair does that. That is what our hair does, and it's dope. And and so not only are we getting to see women of color, but particularly black women rocking their own natural textures, their wash and goes, their braids, their etc. But we're getting to see a really true expression of all of the different amazing things that we can do to express ourselves that had previously been suppressed. So I'm just, it's a good time.
And I just want to piggyback on that because I want to give credit to the women who insisted upon staying the course. Because there was a time when you would show up and you would be the only one in a room with natural hair. And I can attest because I was the only one. Yeah. I know, I'm seriously, I'd come to when I first got to Los Angeles, I mean, it was everybody from at the post office, they had weaves down to, and God, again, jobless. But it was, there were a few of us who just stayed the course, and I just want to, say that it was because we insisted. we continue to show up and continue to insist. And I really do believe that when you show up and continue to insist, that things do change, whether it's with natural hair, the political environment, you know, our health. Continue to show up in those doctor's offices and say, no. If my wrist were hurting, you wouldn't say, sometimes your wrist hurts. No, and show up and insist. And I think if we continue to do that in bigger numbers, I do the world's gonna change.
Yes, 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 I second that.
Absolutely. And thank you all for showing up and sharing your thoughts and your experiences, and for using your talents as artists in the work you do to also advocate for women on health issues and for other issues. So thank you all very much.